Welcome to Season 3 of the Strange, Rare, and Peculiar podcast, a place where we explore the past, present, and future of homeopathy from the perspective of a couple of insiders who have been around the homeo block a couple of times.
Homeo block? The finest. Good morning.
Yes.
To you.
The finest good morning.
Yes.
You are...
You, madam.
Yes, and you, sir.
How you going?
I'm pretty good.
Excellent news.
Yeah, and yourself, sir?
I'm shithouse.
I don't think you're not allowed to curse on the thing. But, yeah, you got the lime.
Yeah, I got the lime.
Yeah.
I got the lime.
You got the lime.
I got the lime.
We're working you through it. You're getting through it, though. You're doing good.
Yeah, my nervous system is shot to hell. My... whatever that interface is between pain and...
You have like a hypersensitivity
Yeah.
on your skin.
Yeah, not good.
But you're gonna make it.
I'm gonna make it.
You're gonna make it. I got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's kind of good living with a homeo.
Yeah, and you're the best client, let me tell you.
Thanks.
Yeah. I say, did you take your remedy? No.
Well, there's usually a question before then.
Well, when you say, I don't feel better. Well, did you take your remedy? No. Well, then take it and then let's discuss.
No, it wasn't that. It was more about, sometimes I can't find it.
Oh, right. There is that.
I did lose it for a day.
Mm-hmm. We do have a full pharmacy. I'm sure we could have worked something out. Anyway, you people who have clients that are non-compliant, you are not alone. I feel your pain. And I feel your pain. I'm sorry that you're struggling. Yeah. But you're doing really well. You're moving through it really quickly.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
So what are we doing?
Oh my gosh, we have so much to talk about.
Wow.
Yeah, we do. I have all sorts of things on the table here.
Can I tell you folks that she's got a glint in her eye?
I do. I was excited. You were not ready to record this morning. I said, come on. I made you a coffee and I brought out a bowl of blueberries from our very own garden. You know why? Because they don't crunch like toast. But you can't make a noise when you eat them. This is the thing.
No worries.
Okay. So...
What's up?
So, we have been asked to talk about a couple of things. Like people write in, they call in, they do whatever they do and ask questions. And recently, questions have been coming from people who are kind of getting into homeopathy and finding conflicting information on various platforms. And there are conversations in little corners of the internet about certain things. And so it was suggested that we touch on a couple of topics. Now, before we do that, so this morning, while I was waiting for you to get yourself ready, I was watching a YouTube video. War and Peace. Oh, I read War and Peace, Sophie's Choice, Anna Karenina. I really had a good time. I was watching a YouTube video. So it's funny how YouTube channels get populated with sort of weird things, which you were talking about something really weird on your channel that is coming up in your YouTube feed, but I can't remember if it's something appropriate to share with the masses. You were just telling me yesterday, and I said, I know what it was. The woman who was 7'11".
The woman that died she didn't die in childbirth, but she was never quite the same. She gave birth to a 23-pound baby.
Yeah.
What's that going to do with anything?
It's just nothing, actually. But just how the internet, you sort of, the algorithm responds to what you put in, and therefore you get this curated information. And I was really curious how you wound up with a 7'11" lady. And of course, my next question to you was, how tall was her husband? And he was 8 feet tall. And I thought that it's just genius that the universe provides.
That's called a circus.
It's okay. Anyway, they did both work for the circus. So,
Yeah.
Actually, and then the conversation that went on from that was, I said, oh, well, when I was thinking about how when you raise kids in the Waldorf, in the Steiner, environment, running away to join the circus is a real thing. Like kids do talk about it as, something that people don't say now as, run away and join the circus or become a carny. You don't hear that very often.
A carny. What's a carny?
Do you have like the people that are traveling with carnivals around with those like icky rides and stuff? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I was looking at a YouTube video this morning, and my algorithm, of course, is populated with strange things, but as well. However, and actually paradoxical things like productivity and simple living. That seems to be the greatest paradox in my... Yeah. But I do love the things that I learn in the productivity space. And it was funny because I had been preparing for recording today and then watched this video that came up. So there's this guy named Ali Abdaal. I don't know if any of you follow Ali Abdaal. I really like him. He actually wrote a book called Feel Good Productivity. And he he trained as a doctor in the UK, and he wasn't thrilled about his job and how well he could do. And he documents it really, really nicely, sort of about how no matter what he tried to do, he could never sort of get ahead and be successful in the system in the way that he wanted to be, just based on the infrastructure, right? Anyway, but this video today was one of the things that he was talking about was how he's doing this special course. He's got this whole company, and it's how to make money on the internet and on YouTube. And, for however much money you pay to his group, you come and you can basically learn to become an influencer. And something hit me really hard because the questions that we have been asked to talk about today come from corners of the internet where people are making statements about homeopathy that are sometimes they're adjacent to reality and sometimes completely not. And like, that's the world, and I'm fine with that. And I, however you consume your content, your media, your news, whatever, right? It does inform what you do. The thing is that there's something different about my 6 a.m. skincare routine and I'm going to give a medicine to a child. Do you know what I mean? So somehow homeopathy has been diluted of all of its potency without any succussion, the succussion being the what it's really about and how you have to learn. So somehow anyone can be a homeopath and treat these complex things without knowledge of what's there. And that's really different than I'm going to become a content creator. People are literally selling medicine in very nice little looking kits, And so it was funny that I was watching that right when I was waiting for you, because that was not on the agenda, although it lives in the back of my mind all the time.
Yeah. And there's a concern.
Oh my gosh, it's a total concern. But so this podcast is not just going to be talking about that, because that is the underpinning of just about everything. But so the topics that came up, there are three things. I don't know that we'll get to all of them, but the first is the mythology that the Flexner Report brought down homeopathy. We'll talk about that. I've got the Flexner Report sitting right here. And the second is that there's no such thing as an aggravation, that's something made up by the quote-unquote classical homeopaths, which I just, I can't, every time I say the classical homeopath, I throw up a little bit in my mouth, because there are people who are practicing homeopathy as it is intended, which has 230 years of clinical evidence and experience behind it. And then there are people who are making stuff up and giving medicine to unsuspecting people. And then, and they put down the quote unquote classicals. Anyway, so there's that, that one is just insane to me. And then the third one is, and I don't know that we'll have time for this, that's if Hahnemann were still alive today. Because people say if Hahnemann were still alive today, well, then he would have to be doing all the things that are not adjacent to homeopathy. So folks have put themselves in Hahnemann's, shoes. What kind of shoes do you think he wore? In, say, 1830? What would be the style of footwear at that point?
Clogs.
Clogs?
I don't know.
Clogs? Did people wear clogs in 1830? And
Little shoes with buckles.
that's what I was thinking. In my mind, they had buckles. I wondered if you had the same...
Buckles.
If you envisioned the same thing. Yeah. Not quite like a pilgrim buckle, but that there would have been a buckle. I wonder, I mean, I don't really know the history of footwear, but like, when did people wear buckles? When did they wear, lace-ups? When was it a slip-on?
A mountaineering boot.
Or a grounding sandal. My earth runners should be arriving any day.
My.
Really excited about that.
The things.
Yeah. Okay. So, the Flexner Report. Should we start there? Or do you want to talk? I mean, do you have anything to say other than what?
No, I'm wilting, just so you know, wilting a little.
Are you? Do you not want to do this right now?
No, I'm fine.
Can I help you with anything?
No, just keep talking. Because
said no one to me ever.
So, folks, if you're wondering why it might be a little one-sided, it's that just the focus is a little difficult.
Well, are you sure you want to? Look at you showing up. Actually, this is the other thing about Ali Abdal. What he was talking about was he oftentimes, well, not for reasons of Lyme disease, but will turn up to record his video and think, I don't want to record. Whatever. Watch out, Luna's about to drink your coffee. Got a cat here investigating what's happening on the table, and not the usual one. So, the Flexner Report. The Flexner Report. So, people believe that the Flexner Report is what took down homeopathy, or that is the party line. And I think that it's kind of like a self-satisfying narrative, right? The man came, big pharma and all this, and they took us down, and we did everything right, and it's the man who came and got us. Why you're cracking up?
Yeah, I like the accent.
You like the accent?
Yeah.
That's not even an accent. That's just me. Oh, you like my accent?
Yeah.
So let's talk about what the Flexner Report was and why it was established. So, the Flexner Report was not undertaken to get rid of homeopathy. In fact, it had nothing to do with homeopathy. So, it was about medical education at that time. So, the Flexner Report was published in 1910. Homeopathy was already crumbling by 1910, by the 1870s. So you've got a 40, depending on what marker you use, you've got like a 30 to 40 year window prior to the publication of Flexner, when homeopathy was having internal struggles to the effect of people practicing whatever. I mean, much like today. And so Flexner came about because in medical education, oh, by the way, I just for a little context, I did a whole course on Flexner because I studied the history of medicine in graduate school. So this is, I reread my notes from, all the notes on the course, which was it was a pretty big module on, the state of play in medical education in the, late 19th and early 20th century. And it was a big part of the research that ultimately led to my dissertation. So one of the things that was happening was that you, at the time, if you went to medical school, you didn't even have to have a high school education. There was no admission or graduation standard at all. There were no standards in medical education. Schools were accepting students who literally could not read. So there wasn't even a basic requirement of literacy. The programs were short. Some of them were only 2 years or less, and there was no clinical work required. Also, it was considered a trade. So this comes from the idea of barbarism, right? So when medicine first started, doctors were really tradespeople who were, like the barber shot pole, the red and white, that's blood and bandages. That's what that represented. And the barbers were the barber surgeons, and they were the folks who went and did the, let's get rid of your stones, let's heal your broken bone, let's, get rid of whatever, cut something out, excise something, blah, blah, blah. Or put a salve on it. And that was different from what then became a doctor. So the doctors and the surgeons took different tracks. In the development of medical education, that came up, but again, without standards. And so these were all for-profit institutions, and there was a derogatory term, which was diploma mill. It's a term that's still used today. And this is what happened in naturopathy before there were, this is what's happening. And one could argue, I'm not saying one should, but one could argue that this is what happens in homeopathy school, right? If there are no standards, and if people are just creating sort of, they can create their own certification, then that's a problem. That's exactly what happened in the 19th century. And so there was a review in an attempt to bring up the standard of medical education and to make that standard of education on par with what was happening primarily in Germany. So medicine evolved in Germany and in France, basically, right? So you had, so the idea was we needed in America to bring up those standards. So that was where it came from. It had nothing to do with dogma. Nothing. Right? This was not in any way, shape, or form to do with homeopathy. So what happened was Flexner Report comes out, and so they evaluated 155 medical schools. Okay? Of the 155, there were 14 schools that taught homeopathy, that were homeopathic, sort of that was their call. There were, so 155 schools. There were 96 allopathic medical schools, 14 homeopathic medical schools, 8 eclectic medical schools, 2 physiomedical, and 35 that were proprietary or unclassified. In other words, teaching whatever they wanted. Of the 14 homeopathic schools, there were 2 or 3 that were considered viable, right? But there were many allopathic schools. In fact, most were designated ineffective and should be closed or completely overhauled. So I think we just need to look at it and go, this wasn't coming after homeopathy. In fact, at that time, let me tell you what Flexner said. What Flexner said about, first let's talk about the criticism of allopathic schools, yeah? And if you want to read the Flexner Report, I have my copy sitting right here, the Flexner Report on Medical Education in the United States and Canada, 1910, by Abraham Flexner. A report to the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching by Abraham Flexner. And it is quite a book. It has lots of charts in the back. It goes through every state. It tells you about every school. It's over 300 pages. And yeah. And so this is...
And in doing so, did they rank according to some sort of criteria the strengths and weaknesses of the different schools? Yeah,
they did. And but let me tell you, this is what Flexner said. So for example, Flexner criticized all the schools based on their merits, right? So about the Chicago College of Medicine and Surgery, he says, quote, "It's grossly overcrowded, utterly incapable of properly teaching a single student." That's an allopathic school. This has nothing to do with homeopathy. Cleveland's American Medical College, quote, "A disgrace. The laboratories are a fiction, the clinical material is insufficient, and the teaching perfunctory." The Memphis Hospital Medical College, quote, "Low entrance standards, poor facilities, and irresponsible faculty." So 72 schools, mostly allopathic, were recommended for closure of the 155.
Half.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, 72 of 155, almost half. So like 47%, something like that.
Yeah.
So So what Flexner said about homeopathy. So on page 160, if you want to check this out, he says, quote, "The homeopaths have overestimated the benefits of institutional separation. That policy has sacrificed standards without securing strength." Now, what he means by that is that in moving away from the scientific developments of the time, then if the homeopaths were to say, we consider ourselves to be totally separate, then they're losing the backing which was required to maintain an institution at that time.
Yeah.
Page 161, quote, "The question is not one of dogma, but of training." So Flexner says, just flat out, the question is not one of dogma, but of training. On page 162, quote, "If a homeopathic school can maintain a university-grade faculty, labs, and hospital connection, it should exist. If not, it should close. That's true for all schools." Okay? So there's no singling out. Then of Hahnemann Medical College in Philadelphia, quote, "It has a competent staff, a good clinical connection, and satisfactory laboratory facilities." So these quotes show that Flexner's critique was about educational quality and facilities, not therapeutic doctrine. It was not about homeopathy, right? And oh, that's a loud noise you're making there. As you eat your blueberries. I gave you blueberries to keep your blood sugar going without a lot of noise, but now this...
One snuck through.
Okay. So this is something that's really important and something that I was really surprised about when I was doing my dissertation research at Drexel, where the archives are for the Homeopathic Medical College of Pennsylvania and the Hahnemann Medical College, was in the catalogs. So every year they put out a course catalog, and I went through every one of them, which was actually really fun. But to see what they were offering and how they were selling themselves. And I actually wanted to pull my notes on that, and I didn't get a chance. But basically what they said, like they were talking about the state-of-the-art labs, their clinical facilities, their pathology lab, that they saw more complex pathology in alignment with the European schools. They were talking about how their dispensaries, like how much, their dispensary worked, and so on and so forth. So, and now we're gonna have to talk about the other side of this, which is the pathology debate, right? Because this is the Flexner part. This isn't about homeopathy itself. But I think it's important to note that, and I've talked about this in a number of lectures, because when we get to talking now about the debate about pathology, which is to come next, which has to do with sort of homeopathy and its place in the scientific conversation. The thing is that these schools, so like Hahnemann or the Homeopathic Medical College of Pennsylvania, they had a board of directors. They had a brick and mortar facility. They had a college, they had a hospital, they had laboratories, they had all of this. So there were significant investments in these institutions, right? And that meant that they were selling the concept of the education, not necessarily just on the doctrine, but that you would learn everything that you would learn in a medical school, and you would learn what you needed in homeopathy. But by the time you get to like 1880, 1890, the emphasis in the homeopathy schools was trending away from Hahnemannian medical doctrine and into the conversations around pathology, the reductionistic pathology. So there's a tension there, isn't there? But at the end of the day, I think we can put to rest that homeopathy schools were closed because there was the big money fight against homeopathy. It's just not true.
Now, Dana would have words with you about that.
Okay, so I was talking about Dana Ullman, and Dana has written this article that has just gotten published, and we've read all the iterations of it. And Dana and I have talked extensively about this. But see, Dana's asking a different question. And research is all about the question that you ask. Dana's question is more ideological, right? If Rockefeller was pro-homeopathy, why did this happen? Why wasn't money given to the promulgation of Hahnemannian theory? But that's not what this is about. This is about, right? So that these two things, sometimes two things can exist at the same time, and there could have been ideological things happening in the background, but that is not the Flexner Report. The Flexner Report was egalitarian, right? It was, if you don't have a good facility, then you should not have a school, right? Because the Flexner Report, I think we just have to acknowledge that the Flexner Report didn't kill homeopathy. It told the truth about medical education, right? So to me, one of the things that I love about the study of history is that history, you have to take it on its own terms. If you apply a presentist narrative, if you apply the principles of what you believe today and you try to project that onto historical actors, you're looking for confirmation bias.
So you are saying that a presentist victim perspective of the decline of homeopathy, poor us, we've been victimized by the man, the pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah.
I've heard people talk about like how, homeopaths don't make enough money because there's the poverty miasm of that is not, it's just not true.
Well, that's not what I was saying.
Oh, no. Oh, okay, sorry.
So, and so often the tipping point has been perceived to be Flexner.
Yes.
And the publication of it.
Yep.
Now, I kind of agree and then I don't agree. Because remember, homeopathy is evolving and changing as well.
Yes.
And so one of the things which has occurred to me over the years is that how on earth do we get from Richard Hughes and Kent in 80 to constitutional homeopathy?
Well, we're going to talk about that. There's a lot to say about that. That is not a Hahnemannian concept whatsoever.
Yeah, exactly.
The principle of the Constitution. But actually, when I said maybe we'll get to the what would Hahnemann have done differently? I take it back, because that actually dovetails into this next point. So if we say that Flexner, just because I think when somebody makes a statement, the Flexner Report killed homeopathy, right? It's a shortcut, and it's just not true. The Flexner Report was a yardstick for judging medical education, and almost 50% of the schools were deemed to not be appropriate for the teaching of medical education.
Yeah, but I suppose... hang on. But to do that, to say that... to essentially ranks, because it's to say this school meets the standards, this school meets the standard, this one doesn't.
Well, you have to set a standard.
Yeah, well, you've created a set of standards.
This is where the challenge comes in.
Right, and so the standards were about laboratories, about diverse faculty, and around all of those things, or many of those things that we would associate with the educational accreditation today.
Yep.
And so I am thinking that if you've got a piece of paper somewhere on the interweb in 1920 that says this school doesn't meet the standard, then you're not going to go to that school. And so in the same way that it would have changed medical education and improved it, it had the effect of weeding out all of the poorer schools.
And the downstream effect, which is really unfortunate, is that in weeding out based on the criteria that were set, it wasn't just homeopathy schools, right? It was also schools that were, serving minorities, schools that admitted women. And there's a whole, there's this whole conversation And of course, because I went to Johns Hopkins, that's where, Johns Hopkins was, when they were getting the money to start Johns Hopkins, it was all money, money was railroad money back then. And the person who was investing lost his money. And so then there was this woman that said, she was an heiress to some other railroad fortune. And she said, yeah, I will invest in this school, but you have to admit women. And it was like, so we also have to see that these issues are always in the context of their time, right? These things happen. And this is this is one of the struggles that we have in, how are people dealing with history today? And when we try to see historical moments based on how we feel they should be, it changes things. So for example, there was an article last week, the week before, about the Mutter Museum. Which happens to be a favorite of my museums, a favorite place to go. The Mutter Museum was part of the College of Physicians back in the day. And when medicine was becoming established, it's kind of like zoos, right? Like in Philadelphia, we had the first zoo. And now I look at a zoo and I'm like, really? Do we need to keep these animals in cages? You can see them, people go on safaris. It's not, you can see them in their habitat. Look, your mom watches the albatross cam, right? You watch another cam of some creature. What is the one you also watch? Weren't you watching another? Anyway, but okay, so it's an outmoded thing, right? But does that mean that, so maybe you could look at zoos and say, well, these are living animals and we have better ways to do this and zoos should adapt and change. But if you're looking at the Mutter Museum as an example, you will see that there are what some people would say, there's macabre evidence of medical oddities, which then people are not sort of perceiving with reverence or the understanding of how these bodies were procured. It was often people who had no agency. They couldn't give consent, or they would give their body for, whatever purposes, so that they could get enough money for their family to eat. Or there were grave diggers, grave robbers, right? So there was this controversy about the Mutter because people came in and said, well, you have to see it through how we see it today, which is people should have consent. These people didn't have agency and da-da-da. I totally believe that is true. At the same time, we should understand, I think anyway, what actually happened. And in the evolution of anything, if you sanitize it and you don't understand what happened, then all you're doing is building a narrative to suit what you want it to be. So if we say, just blanket, the Flexner Report killed homeopathy, it's just not true. The Flexner Report was a report that happened at a point in time to try to elevate the standards in medical education, full stop. It had nothing to do with dogma. Dana Ullman is researching how that dogma might have been influenced by how the wealthiest people of that time, the Rockefellers and the Carnegies, were giving money to the propagation of a particular, form of medicine. But that takes us to the next thing, which is sort of intersectioned with what Hahnemann might do differently or say. And this takes us to, what happened with the fight between Lippe and Hering, right? So Adolphus Lippe and Constantine Hering. So they were, I just refer to them now as frenemies. They were the best of friends, and then they hit an impasse when they both became faculty members of the medical college here in Philadelphia. And what started to happen was Hering became more and more and more enamored with the science of the time, which was a bioreductionistic science. Lippe wanted to stay true to Hahnemann's principles. You can read Andre Sain's 2-volume, 4 inches high each volume, books on Lippe's writings. Also, if you have Radar Opus, I don't know if it's on Synergy as well, but if you just do do a search on Lippe's, on his rants, basically. I mean, it's amazing how he just stood for Hahnemannian principles. Now, this is a tough one because, Hahnemann lived through a lot of it, but not all of it. But he did weigh in right? So Constantine Herring, for example, is taking homeopathy and making it more reductionistic. So, for example, he would say, we need to get the sulfur cyanide, we need to know what the sulfur cyanide amount is in a particular substance, or we should, there was the correspondence between Herring and Samuel Swan. Swan writes to Herring and he says, do you have any blood? No, what did he ask for? Not blood. He was septic blood. Septic blood. Have you potentized septic blood, and do you know anyone who has? And if so, send me the highest potency that you have. And Herring writes back and he says, no, I don't, but
I got a guy.
First he says, but all septic wounds respond to arsenicum, which makes me mad because no, his septic wound from a dissecting injury responded to arsenicum, right? But then he says, I got a guy, Wormley in Chicago, who can, because Herring is saying you should find whatever substance within the blood to do whatever. So you see where Herring is going in one direction. He had the most expensive microscope of his time, $700 or $750, right? Hahnemann writes to Herring and he says, what you're doing is okay, but don't go too far. He says in his letter, sit modus in rebus. I think that's the quote. It's Latin for everything in moderation, right? So Herring is going clearly in one direction. Lippe is saying, yeah, I'm not so sure that we should go away from it. And the way that this argument worked out was through pathology, through reductionism, through virology, pathology. So by the time they're having their battle, if you go through every one of the course catalogs, you see that they're favoring special pathology courses. And there are more of them than there are nods to Hahnemannian philosophy. For example, there were years where the organon wasn't even on the course list. Chronic diseases, there were years when it wasn't on. Materia medica pura, right? So depending on the year that you're looking at, it may or may not have even been fully inclusive of Hahnemannian principles. And this is in the 1870s. They're already fighting about it. Now, where this intersects with the Flexner issue is that the criteria of a homeopathic, of any medical school, would have been requiring a certain level of laboratory sufficiency, pathological sufficiency.
Yeah.
And this is where we need to be having the conversation of what makes a good homeopath. Because I think if, like I always think about, well, if I had a half an hour to ask Hahnemann questions, where would I even start? I know where I would kind of start, but if I were required to go to this part of it, because I think there's a way, Hahnemann was a medical doctor, and he didn't say throw away everything medical. He said perceive the medical in a different way. So I think there could have been a happy medium, right? And I think that Herring and Lippe just never quite got there. But at the end of the day, when there were two hospitals, Herring's hospital was much more successful, leaning into the medical phenomena of his day. And he wrote, because he and Lippe were in this huge fight, and oh my gosh, reading the letters, I've gotten to know Herring's handwriting really well, and when he's mad, he writes sometimes on double-sided onion-skinned paper with a really heavy hand, and they were fighting because Herring says, if we don't stay with the science of the times, they're going to think that he says, we're going to be relegated to the dustbin of quackery, right? And so he leaned in one direction, which then wound up making Hahnemann Medical College more successful. And and that Hahnemann Hospital, still taught homeopathy, albeit in lesser and lesser and lesser amounts ongoing. Lippe started a hospital, which I feel like if you had to be in the hospital would be the one you wanted to get to, based on all the Hahnemannian principles. And they were underfunded and they couldn't get people to work there because the doctors and the nurses wanted to be exposed to the newest technology of the time, right? So there's this way in which you could almost see why people say there was a problem with Flexner and homeopathy, but it's not dogmatic. It's about systems and functionality, right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Did I say that clearly?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like in the weeds on this, so I want to make sure that the top line comes across. So, but here's the other part, which is if we're going to talk about the downfall of homeopathy, right? Then we have a different problem to talk about, because homeopathy declined. The decline really hit like from the 1870s to the 1890s. So this is sort of the peak institutional growth of homeopathy. So that closes the gap a little from the number of years I was saying with Flexner. But that growth was full of what Hahnemann would have called half homeopaths. And so this really became clear in 1876 because there was this exposition, the Centennial Exposition, and it was in Philadelphia, and there were like 700 homeopaths who came. It's this huge book, right? And it was part of the World Homeopathic Convention, and the AIH they were the sponsors of it. But what happened was yes, you saw 700 homeopaths all coming together and people were really excited about the number, but it laid bare all of the differences. And there were all kinds of presentations that if you looked at them as a homeopath, you would say, this is barely adjacent to Hahnemannian homeopathy, if at all. And remember, this is during the time when the AIH, in order to improve its numbers, said they didn't even have the word homeopathy in their bylaws for a time, right? I mean, and that's what happened when the IAH, the IHA, the International Hahnemannian Association, came along in 1880, because already by then people had moved so far away from what homeopathy is that Lippe and Kent was involved in the IHA to try and salvage homeopathy, right? And so what happened was that homeopathy was moving into, or attempting to move into, this bioreductionistic paradigm. But Hahnemann was saying from the beginning, we have a different paradigm. Just look at the footnote to Aphorism 1, right? So the challenge in the fall of homeopathy was about how do I say this? I mean, I guess how homeopathy lost its way.
Well, lost its center and its sense of identity.
Better.
Yeah.
The center.
Yeah.
Because from homeopathic colleges started to lower their standards as early as the 1890s, right? And not just and this was because of the rise of germ theory. So this created, if you've got leadership that is,
just put those two things together. What do you mean?
So you've got this rift between like Herring and Lippe happening, right? So that was a little earlier. But Herring died 1888, I believe, 1888. Lippe 1901, I think. I can't remember, but leading up to it, right? So their rift happened before that, right? If Herring dies in 1888, this is happening in, from it would have been before 1880. And this becomes this real, it's a challenge. Like, just think about all the parameters. Like, forget about dogma, right? If you have a business and you need to sustain your business, and you're trying to understand where Hahnemann is, I'm trying to make this point really simple without getting into Herring and Paracelsus and everything. Right, because all roads lead to it. But I have to give Herring credit for really trying to understand what healing and what cure is about. He deserves all the props for that. But he went in a direction that was not the same direction that Hahnemann was going. And that's a challenge. Because Hering went down Paracelsus lane, right? So that's doctrine of signatures, isopathy, yeah? So, and a more sort of...
And the science of the day.
And the science of the day, yep.
Yep.
And more on that. I mean, that's a whole other line of discussion. But Hering is bringing this in, and then Lippe is working with Hahnemannian philosophy. The thing is that it doesn't negate having a really good school. And I think that we would be better served to have homeopathy with a level of medical education that allows people to participate in the system of the day, right? But with clear, comprehensive understanding of homeopathy. But like, if you need a surgery, you need a surgery. So imagine, because think about it, they taught surgery from the beginning. From the beginning in the homeopathy colleges. Look at Guernsey, Guernsey and his obstetrics, right? So somehow, though, it was impossible to not get swept up in the emerging bacteriological paradigm. It was impossible not to.
It would have been exciting times to be a scientist or a healthcare provider in the 1800s. Yeah. I think all of those developments, you could not have seen the evolution of germ theory without getting excited about it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think, yeah.
But see, Hahnemann understood it much more fully. And Hahnemann, the arc of what Hahnemann figured out through his, empirical work was that bacteriology and virology and all of that, it's fine in an acute setting, but there's a consequence in a chronic setting. This is the thing, this miasma is a much bigger conversation than just, an infectious disease principle. There's a lot more to it. And that's why, from 1816 to 1828, when Hahnemann's working on chronic diseases, he's really kind of noodling through all of this. That's why, when Hering introduced, what he called saurine, which we now call sarinum, and Hahnemann says to think that you could cure the itch diathesis, in other words, the psoric miasm, with the disease of the same, nothing but calamity will result. It's in the footnote to aphorism 56. I mean, I'm paraphrasing probably, but it's close, right? So, but this is where a lot of homeopathy went to, and a lot of sort of trying to incorporate homeopathy into a hospital-based system. Look what happened with, just look at the bowel nosodes, for example, right? So you look at Bach, or Bach, however you like to call him, and the flower essence guy. He was the chief bacteriologist, and then he got hired to the Royal London Homeopathic Hospital, and then he's working with the Patersons, this husband and wife duo, who were also, bacteriologists, and they had made discoveries about how a homeopathic remedy could change bowel flora. And so then they were trying to jump it to say, could you cure disease just with using these, these nosodes, right? I mean, it would have been a really interesting conversation to have. But if you only look at it and just say, oh, these medicines do X, Y, or Z, you're missing the whole arc of their discovery, what prompted it, what they were trying to do, and what they said in the end, right? Which is, yeah, these work, there are no provings. We were trying to do something, right? They were trying to match what could happen with a good homeopathic remedy and never repeat them. Never repeat a bowel nosode unless the whatever the ratio of lactobacilli is above some percentile and rising. And the only way that you would know that is through a stool sample. And yet people have sort of jumped and said, oh, we'll just use these for, all manner of whatever, and give lots of bowel nosodes in a row. I mean, people are saying take them daily. right? When the people who worked in the hospital who discovered them are like, don't do that unless, never repeat. Like, so do you see how like this was all happening because homeopathy hit a point during the bacteriological revolution and people tried to apply the same principles, but it doesn't work that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you think?
I it's been a recent revelation to me that the poor application of outdated medical bioscience in homeopathy is rife.
Yes. It's kind of comical.
Well, it's just like medical science is becoming more holistic, while homeopathy is becoming more
not
reductionistic.
All homeopathy, not the classical people. Sorry. It does have a bile moment with it.
Yeah. But it's kind of weird that that's the quality of the thinking, and it's pretty poor.
Is it just to be contrary?
No, it's looking for pragmatic results on an ongoing basis. So it's a process of it is an empirical process. It worked last time. I'll try it again.
Right. Yeah, it's a funny thing. It's a funny odd time. Anyway, so those, I feel like those are two topics that we've been asked to talk about. Well, there were three. We didn't get to the aggravation. Maybe we'll talk about that next. But if you're wondering, is the concept of an aggravation a thing? Yeah, it is. And if you want to read up on it, you can look at aphorisms 156, 157 to 61, 163, and 180. I went and found them for you.
There you go.
Because Hahnemann talks about it a lot and why it happens. And Hahnemann's whole evolution was around how do you avoid an aggravation, which is what resulted in the 6th edition of the Organon. Partially 5th and 6th editions, right? Around the minimization or avoidance of aggravation, which is about posology and delivery of the remedy. But we'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm off my game.
Aw, I'm sorry too.
Yeah.
You need a little soup.
Can I have some soup?
I think you can have some soup.
Are you going to make me some soup?
I might. I just might.
A blueberry soup?
A blueberry soup. You ate all your blueberries. That's good.
I did. Sorry for the popping.
For the pop. Oh, right. Yeah. Do you know that there was a children's book called Blueberries for Sal? That book never made it to New Zealand, did it? It's very American, but it was, I think it's in Maine. And this little girl, she just eats all the blueberries along the way, but then a bear comes. I won't spoil it for you. We have it upstairs.
Really?
Yeah, of course we do.
Wow.
I'm going
to keep going with The
Hobbit.
Hobbit.
Al's reading The Hobbit again. Did you ever read The Hobbit?
No.
All the way through?
No.
Really?
I got put off by everything in it. I read the Lord of the Rings when I was in my mid-20s.
Right.
And even then I struggled.
I was surprised.
But I'm listening to this.
Yeah, I was surprised that it is not required reading in New Zealand. It's not like part of a curriculum. I had to read it when I was in high school, and my kids had to read it as well.
Oh.
Yeah. I know.
There you go.
Well, that's what you should do today as you convalesce.
What a great idea. Let's make tea.
Okay. And
all right,
there
folks.
we go. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah. Flexner, Abraham.
It's a complicated conversation, but just to make a statement, it's not exactly that. There's a lot more to it. All right.
You have a good week. Take care.
See you, everybody.
Ciao.
Dreaming of becoming a homeopath, but you need a little more time to make it happen? The Academy of Homeopathy Education's part-time program gives a bit more flexibility to study. It's a 4-year journey designed to fit into your real and busy life. Learn more at ahe.org/homeopathy. homeopathy.online.